in the glittering heart of Seoul. There are two things you never want to catch: a stray bullet from the KANG syndicate and an attitude from Dr. NIA Williams. Marco Kang was the ice king of the South Korean underworld, a man who spoke in whispers and ruled with a blade. He treated emotions like a weakness to be purged. Then he stumbled into a clinic and found Nia, a brilliant African-American trauma nurse who had just moved to Korea for a fresh start. She didn't care about his lineage or his legend. She just cared that he was bleeding on her clean floor. This is a story of soul nights, forbidden rhythms, and the woman who taught the coldest man in Asia how to burn. If you love Dangerous Story of Twist of Love, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere, because this one will keep you on your feet. Tell us in the comments section where you're watching us from so we can grade you in our next video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with a friend who liked dramatic love story. Marco Kang was the heir to the Chang Syndicate, the most feared organization in Korea. His life was a series of bow ties, high-stakes gambling in Jeju, and cleaning up messes in the dark alleys of Gangnam. He was a man of tradition and iron discipline. Marco wasn't interested in love because, in his world, a wife wasn't a partner, she was a political bargaining chip or a target for a rival's blade. He lived in a high-tech fortress overlooking the Han River, surrounded by luxury but completely devoid of warmth. He was a king with a throne made of ice, and he planned to keep it that way. Marcos's world cracked open when he stumbled into a 24-hour clinic in Itaewon. Clutching a knife wound from a botched meeting, he expected a terrified local doctor. Instead, he found NIA Williams. Nia had traded the chaos of Philadelphia for the high-tech medical world of Seoul. She was a top-tier nurse, but being a black woman in Korea meant she had to be twice as good and 10 times as tough. She moved to Seoul to escape a toxic ex and a stagnant life, finding peace in the city's late-night energy and the vibrant dance studios of Hongdae. When Marco walked in, she didn't see a boss. She saw a man with a low hemoglobin count and a high-fashion suit he was about to ruin. Marco was mesmerized, not just by her beauty, but by the fact that she looked him in the eye without trembling. The emergency room was actually a tiny, high-end clinic Nia was moonlighting at. The scene was pure drama. Marco tried to bark orders in Korean, but Nia just popped her gum and pointed to the chair. "Look, Appa, I don't care how many bodyguards are outside," she said in fluent, sassy Korean. "If you don't sit down, you're going to faint, and I am not lifting you." Marco sat, stunned. As she worked on his stitches, his heart rate spiked. Every time her warm skin brushed his, the Ice King felt a thaw. It was funny. This terrifying man was literally holding his breath because he didn't know how to act around a woman who called him out on his nonsense. For the next month, Marco Kang became the clinic's most frequent visitor. The man who survived assassination attempts was suddenly worried about a paper cut or a mild headache. He used every excuse in the book just to sit in her ward and watch her work. His right-hand man, Jun-ho, was losing his mind. "Boss, you've had 3 physicals this week. You're the healthiest man in Asia." Marco would just stare out the window of his black sedan. His heart was forcing him back to that clinic like a magnet. He was a man who owned the city, yet he felt like a nervous teenager every time Nia asked him to say, "ah." The Ice King of Seoul was melting, and the entire KANG syndicate was watching it happen in slow motion. It started when Marco asked Nia out for a traditional high-end dinner date. He expected her to jump at the chance to dine with the most powerful man in Gangnam. Nia, laughing a dinner date? In that suit? You look like you're going to a funeral, Marco. I'm busy saving lives. Try again in another lifetime. But Marco Kang didn't become the boss by taking no for an answer. He turned the hospital into his personal playground. One Tuesday, he limped into the ER, groaning and clutching his leg, claiming he'd twisted his ankle in a high-intensity workout. Dr. Nia, scanning his perfectly fine x-rays, Mr. Kang, your bones are denser than your head. There isn't a scratch on you. Get out. Marco, completely serious, the pain is internal, Nia. Perhaps a steak dinner would help the inflammation? Dr. Nia, next patient, please. He didn't stop there. 2 days later, he showed up claiming temporary blindness because he stared at the sun too long, hoping she'd have to lead him by the hand. When she threatened to use a giant needle to relieve the pressure, his vision miraculously returned. Then came the most desperate trick. He sent his 200-pound bodyguard, Junho, into the clinic to tell Nia that Marco had lost his voice from stress and could only communicate his dinner order via a handwritten note. Nia just shredded the note and handed Junho a bottle of throat lozenges. After a dozen rejections, Sunday finally arrived. Nia headed to the Han River Park for some much-needed fresh air, wanting to forget about the grumpy mobster for just 1 hour. But there he was, sitting on a bench, no suit, no bodyguards, just a man in a hoodie holding 2 cups of coffee. The sound of wind rustling through cherry blossoms. For the first time, the drama was gone. There was no boss, just Marco. They sat and talked for hours, not about power or medicine, but about her home in Philly and his childhood spent in the shadows of his father's legacy. He told her how the silence of his fortress was killing him, and she told him how the noise of the world made her want to hide. Marco, voice soft, sincere, I don't have a trick today. Nia, I'm just a man who's tired of eating alone, please. Nia looked at him, really looked at him, saw the loneliness behind the legend. She felt a tug in her heart that no medical textbook could explain. Nia, sighing with a smile, fine. 1 dinner. But if you talk about syndicate business once, I'm stabbing you with a breadstick. That night, the friendship officially shifted. Over spicy street food in Myeongdong, the laughter was loud, the eye contact was lingering, and the air between them hummed with a dangerous, beautiful electricity. The Ice King had finally found his son, but in the dark corners of Seoul, the shadows were already beginning to close in. The peace of Seoul was shattered the moment Nia stepped off the subway in Hongdae. In the blink of an eye, a black van skidded to a halt. The side door flew open and Nia was gone before her phone even hit the pavement. The Park clan had made their move. They didn't see a brilliant woman. They saw a foreign weakness they could use to bleed the Chang syndicate dry. A sudden, sharp silence. Then a low, vibrating hum of tension. When the news reached Marco in his high-rise office, the air in the room seemed to freeze. His right-hand man, Junho, walked in, hands trembling as he showed Marco a photo of Nia's ID badge lying in a dark alley. For 10 seconds, Marco didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. It was the silence before a nuclear blast. His eyes, usually cold as ice, turned into pits of pure, dark fire. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He simply stood up and unbuttoned his designer blazer. Marcos's voice is deathly, calm whispers Yonho. Call the specialists. Tell them the architect is retiring, and the Reaper is taking over for the night. Within 20 minutes, the suit was gone. Marco was strapped into matte black tactical gear, a silent arsenal of steel and vengeance. He didn't go as a boss. He went as a force of nature. Tires screeching, the heavy metallic clack of a weapon being loaded. They tracked the Park clan to a rotting shipyard warehouse in Incheon. Marco didn't wait for a plan. He arrived with 50 of his most elite soldiers, but he moved 10 paces ahead of them. The fight was a symphony of chaos. For 45 minutes, the warehouse was a meat grinder. There were at least 80 Park clan mercenaries, but Marco moved like a shadow in a nightmare. He wasn't just fighting, he was hunting. Every room he cleared brought him closer to the back office. His knuckles were split, his breath was ragged, and his heart was screaming her name with every pulse. He kicked in the final heavy steel door. Inside, Nia was tied to a chair, 3 guards circling her. As Marco entered, one guard lunged at her, but Nia didn't scream. With a surge of adrenaline, she kicked a heavy, stainless steel medical tray off a nearby cart, sent it flying into the guard's throat, and used the distraction to throw herself toward the floor. Marco dropped the remaining 2 guards in a heartbeat. He didn't check his own wounds. He stumbled toward her, his hands shaking as he sliced her zip ties. When she stood up, he didn't say a word. He just grabbed her face, his thumbs tracing her jawline to make sure she was real. Marco, breathless, Nia, I thought the world ended tonight. He didn't wait for her to answer. He pulled her in, his fingers tangling in her hair, and kissed her with a desperation that tasted like blood, rain, and absolute relief. It wasn't a gentle kiss, it was a claim. It was the sound of a man finding his soul in the middle of a war zone. Soft, echoing sirens in the distance, the sound of a heavy car door closing. On the drive back to Seoul, the adrenaline faded, leaving a cold, terrifying reality. Marco sat in the back of the SUV, holding Nia's hand so tightly his knuckles were white. Marco, you aren't going back to that apartment, Nia. Not tonight. Not ever. My home is the only place in this country with enough steel in the walls to keep you breathing. Dr. Naif, voice tired but firm. Marco, I can't live in a fortress. I'm a nurse, not a prisoner. Marco, turning to her, his eyes raw, then consider it a hospital stay. I'm the patient, and I can't survive unless you're in the next room. Please, just stay until I make sure there are no more shadows left to hunt you. Nia looked at the man who had just dismantled an army for her. She saw the fear in the great Marco King's eyes, the fear of losing her. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the blood-stained tactical vest feeling surprisingly like the safest place in the world. For now, the Ice King's castle would have to be her home. Soft, melancholy strings, a violin playing a lonely melody over the sound of rain. Life inside Marco's fortress was a paradox of gold and iron for weeks. The Ice King and the nurse lived as lovers behind bulletproof glass. It was a domestic dream forged in a nightmare. Marco would watch her sleep, his fingers tracing the curve of her shoulder as if making sure she hadn't turned into a ghost. They shared quiet breakfasts overlooking the Han River, and Nia would teach him to dance in the moonlight of the living room, his heavy, tactical boots replaced by soft socks. For a moment, the blood was washed away. But Nia couldn't stop seeing it. Every time Marco's phone buzzed, his face would shift back into that cold, lethal mask. She saw the bruises on his knuckles that never quite healed, and the silent men with guns who stood outside their bedroom door. The love was deep, but the shadows were deeper. Nia's voice trembling. Marco, leave it. Leave the syndicate. We can go anywhere. A simple life. No more guns. No more blood. Just us. Marco looked at her, and for the first time he looked truly terrified. His fear wasn't of death. It was of the vacuum he would leave behind. He knew that in his world, you don't retire, you get erased. If he stepped down, the vultures would descend on everyone he loved, including her. Marcio's voice cracking. If I leave, I'm a dead man walking. Nia, and you'd be the target for every man who wants my throne. I stay because I'm the only wall between you and the monsters. I can't give you a simple life. I can only give you a safe one. The no was a dagger in her heart. Nia realized that while she was trying to save his soul, he was busy preparing for the next war. She couldn't be the healer to a man who lived to break things. She began to plan her escape, the ticking of a clock. Fast-paced, tense percussion. Marco sensed her pulling away. He doubled the security. He checked her phone. He tried to protect her by making the house a beautiful prison. But Nia was a nurse. She knew how to move under the radar. At 3 a.m. on a Thursday, while the city was draped in fog, she made her move. She left with nothing but a backpack and the stethoscope she'd used to save him that first night. She slipped through the service entrance, bypassed the sensors she'd watched the guards set, and boarded a KTX high-speed train to the coast. Every vibration of the track felt like her heart breaking. She wasn't running from Marco. She was running for her life. The sound of ocean waves crashing gently. She arrived in Busan at a small, weathered cottage tucked away on the cliffs of Haeundae. The house was tiny, made of salt-worn wood and stone, smelling of sea spray and jasmine. It was the opposite of the Gangnam fortress. Alone in that quiet house, Nia sat by the window and watched the tide. She had her simple life, but it felt hollow. She missed the way his raspy voice sounded in the morning. She missed the heat of his skin and even the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't looking. She realized she'd escaped the bullets, but she couldn't escape the man. Nia is whispering to the sea in Korea. They say your fate is tied by a red string, but our string is covered in blood, and it's still pulling me back. The sound of soft, rhythmic ocean waves crashing against cliffs. A melancholic piano melody begins. A month had passed since Nia vanished into the salt air of Busan. She had her simple life, a quiet job at a local clinic and a view of the sea, but her heart was a ghost town. Every time she closed her eyes, she didn't see the ocean. She saw the man who had torn apart a warehouse just to hear her breathe. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold, Nia walked out onto her porch. Her heart stopped. There, leaning against a familiar black sedan parked on the sand, was Marco. He looked thinner, his eyes hollowed out by sleeplessness, his Ice King exterior completely shattered. He couldn't. He simply reached into his pocket and held out her old stethoscope, the one she'd left behind in Gangnam. Their eyes met, and the air between them vibrated with a month's worth of unspoken words. Marco, voice was raspy, raw with emotion. The house is too quiet, Nia. I tried to go back to being a ghost, but I'm haunted by you. Nia didn't wait. She ran across the sand, her feet sinking into the earth, and threw herself into his arms. Marco caught her with a strength that felt like a vow. He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in as if he'd been drowning for weeks. When he pulled back, he cupped her face in his scarred hands, his thumbs tracing the tears on her cheeks. The kiss was a collision. It was the taste of salt, desperation, and 1,000 I love yous they'd both been too afraid to say. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a surrender. In that moment, on a lonely beach in Busan, the king of Seoul realized his empire was nothing compared to the woman in his arms. The Afrobeat track from the beginning returns, but it's blended with a modern, upbeat K-pop synth. They didn't find a normal life because Marco Chang was never meant for a picket fence, but they found a new life. Marco returned to Seoul and began the slow, dangerous process of dismantling the illegal arms of the syndicate, turning his empire into a legitimate global powerhouse. He did it for her, so he could be a man she was proud to stand beside. Nia returned as the head nurse of a state-of-the-art community clinic Marco built in the heart of the city. She still saves lives, and Marco still protects them. If you walk through the KANG estate at night, you won't hear the sound of guns being cleaned or money being counted. You'll hear the vibrant rhythm of Afrobeats and the laughter of two people who prove that fate isn't just a red string. It's the choice to hold on even when the world tries to pull you apart. The architect finally finished his masterpiece. The doctor finally found a heart she didn't have to operate on to fix. And the city of Seoul? It finally learned that the most powerful thing in the underworld isn't a weapon. It's a love that refuses to die. Did the Ice King finally earn his redemption, or is the war just beginning? Comment Rain if you want a sequel series. Subscribe and hit the bell to stay tuned for the next cinematic saga. Thanks for watching.